Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The Cursed Town. Content warning. Murder, suicide. He walked up through the dusty road which led to the small town of Tamans. It was twilight, and a light wind was blowing. Far away, the crop plantations acquired a greenish-orange color due to the light of the sun. On the other side, one could catch a faint glimpse of the Tamans church, with its tall steeple standing majestically high up in the sky. The yellow-orange hue of the sky washed the town, and the muddy red road was illuminated with a touch of gradient yellow. The whole town looked peaceful, and surprisingly, nobody was outside their houses. He entered the town and looked at the banyan tree in front of him. It had remained much the same. He looked up at the houses and walked towards them. Darkness was falling now. The red-orange hue was slowly swept away, and a dark blue color entered, only with a touch of crimson at its bottom. Shadows fell here and there, creating a spooky atmosphere, and he quickened his pace, as if to avoid the evil spell cast by the shadows of the houses. The moon came up, not too bright, for clouds were starting to surround it from all sides. He glanced upwards and realized that he had to take shelter somewhere. Rainfall could occur any time now. He walked through the dusty and muddy road and looked here around for inns, but there were none. Finally, he found a big apartment which was deserted. He let out a sigh of relief and walked up the stairs and entered the apartment. It was evident that the apartment was still under construction work. It was not completed. However, years of neglect had withered away the raw smell of the brick walls, and small plants could be seen growing almost everywhere. All of them had a feeling of evil in them. The brick walls, the plants, the floors, and even the ceiling. It was like they had witnessed a lot of sad events and were telling him not to go further inside the house. The house itself was spooky, with its large corridors and almost no rooms. A huge, round staircase led to the other floors. The grayish appearance of the apartment matched perfectly with his gray and withered t-shirt and pants. He went up the staircase and reached the terrace. It was broad and wide, and one could see the beautiful town stretched before it. He looked down and was surprised to see an old woman with a lantern standing in the doorway of the apartment, waving her hands to call him. He descended the staircase and ran out of the apartment to meet the old woman. The woman was short in stature and had gray hair, with sometimes a tint of black in them. Her face was wrinkled and she looked at him through her cat-green eyes, piercingly. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "I am a visitor, and I came here for certain business matters. I could not find any inn to spend the night in, so I came here," he said. She looked at him suspiciously, and then said, "Okay, you better come with me. This place is not good, especially at night." He nodded his head and followed the old woman. He was cold with fear and could not understand what was happening. He followed her till they reached a cottage, and the old woman asked him to enter. He went inside and enjoyed the warmth of the fire which was lit. He sat down on a sofa, and the woman came to her with a candle. She placed the candle on the table and handed him a plate. "You must be hungry. Here, have some food. You better not go to the apartment anymore." "Why?" he asked. "It's a long story. I have seen too much of this world to remember happy deeds. Most are evil." "What do you actually mean? Do you want to hear?" "Yes, I do." She took a long, deep breath and then began. "Long ago, when I was about 17 years of age, there used to live a plantation owner named Hamilton. He had a lot of money and was very rich. You see those plantations? All those were Sir Hamilton's. He was not only rich, but kind and generous too. He used to donate with open hands. He had a beautiful wife, 4 daughters, and 1 son. However, naturally, his neighbors were very jealous of him and despised him. He did not care that much for that. But one day, his neighbors attacked his family. His daughters were of almost my age then, and the son was only a baby. They killed his daughters and his wife, but somehow Hamilton and his son were able to escape. "Why did not Hamilton inform the police?" he asked. "There was no evidence against the neighbors. He had nothing to do. I later heard that he had fled somewhere to Canada." "But how does it relate to the apartment?" The old woman sighed. Her green eyes glistened, and she said, "The apartment was being made by Hamilton. He wanted to turn it into a hospital." "Yes, but how does that matter anyway?" Rain had started falling heavily, and the fire and candle went out. The 2 people were left in total darkness. However, he could still see the old woman's eyes glistening. The old woman said, "For the past few years, there had been a lot of suicides there. Many girls of around 16, 17 years are committing suicide there. It all started with the daughter of Mrs. Morpin. She jumped from the terrace we were standing a few minutes ago. The second case was of Mrs. Rayon's daughter. She was found hanging from the chandelier one morning, her face white and terror-stricken. He was taken aback and looked at the old woman with wide and fearful eyes. Lightning struck, illuminating the whole room for a moment, and he could see the old woman's face, ugly, wrinkled with a strong, piercing glance, which was almost witch-like. He wanted to run out of the house, but some strange power kept him rooted to his seat. The old woman said, "You better go to sleep now. I guess you had a very tiresome day." The old woman showed him his bedroom, and he fell down on his bed, immediately asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he could see the sun shining brilliantly outside. He heaved himself up and went to the living room. The old woman was preparing coffee. She handed him a cup, and he sat down on the sofa. He drank from the cup the delicious, thick cappuccino and felt refreshed. He almost forgot all the horrible incidents from yesterday night. "Where do you want to go today? I can show you the way. It is evident that you are new to this place, as you were talking about inns in here. I have heard about Kingsman's Place here. Can you please take me there?" "Kingsman's Place? Okay, I will. It is a business center here. When do you want to go?" "About 9:30. What do you say? Please prepare a packed lunch for me." "Of course. Get ready then." He went back to his bedroom and took out his suitcase. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was middle-aged, but still, he looked pretty young. He brought out a coat, shirt, and pant and put it on. He looked the perfect businessman. After having breakfast, the two went out. On the way, they came across the Flint River. There he saw some girls whispering and talking together. One of them was extremely beautiful. Her fair skin with an orange tint made one remember pure milk. Her eyes were a deep blue, and she had beautiful black eyelashes. Her cheeks were pink, and her lips were a light red. Her mass of curls was thrown at her back, and she wore a pretty green dress. Her hands were well toned, and her legs were slender and well shaped. She looked a pretty picture. He stared at her for some time, and then she turned to the old woman, and pointing to the girl, he asked, "Who is that girl?" The old woman glanced at the girl and then said, "She is Mr. Trudeau's daughter. Pretty, isn't she?" "Yes," he said. "What is her age?" "About 17. He sighed and gestured at the old woman to move forward. They reached Kingsman S. Place, and the old woman left him there with his lunchbox. He did not wait there. As soon as the old woman was out of sight, he started running. He did not stop until he reached the old building. He entered and went up to the terrace. The terrace was absolutely empty. Despite being so large, the parapets were very low, and there were high risks of falling to death in case of an accidental slip. Unlike the rest of the house, almost no plants were there on the terrace due to some unknown reason. He roamed here and there on the terrace. He stepped very carefully, and whenever he looked down, he was sick at the sight of houses so far down below. He hated heights and was afraid of them. He went downstairs and waited. "You know, Laura, I will go to Grandma Fontaine's house today." The words kept ringing in his mind. To reach Grandma Fontaine's house, she had to cross this building. There she was coming, alone. Nobody was with her. He waited silently, and as soon as she came in front of the apartment, he gripped her hand and pulled her inside. Before she could scream, he put a handkerchief under her nose, and smelling the chloroform, she fell unconscious. He now prepared for it. He dragged her upstairs to the terrace and carefully washed her face. He then threw her down the parapet, and she landed with a loud thud sound. Dead. Yes, she was dead. Blood was flowing from her, and her pretty face was peaceful. He quickly fled from the place before anybody could see him. He did not return to the old woman's house. He kept walking towards the outskirts of the town. It would take him almost 3 hours to get out. He had seen his own sisters and mother get killed in front of him. Those Morpins, Rayons, Trudeaus, and Greys have killed them out of jealousy. He and his father had somehow fled. But after some time, his father also died. He died saying, "Kill Morpin, kill Trudeau, kill Rayon, kill Grey. Don't let them live." He had done that. He had killed all of them, except Grey's daughter. He would be back for her after the next 4 years. Yes, he would not let her live. They do not deserve to live. They had destroyed his life. He would destroy theirs. He would not let them be happy when his own happiness had been snatched away from him. Never. He looked back at the town. It was twilight yet again. The town looked peaceful, but he could hear faint sounds of crying. Let them cry. They will have to cry again after 4 years. He turned and walked away from the town as darkness fell and made the town silent. Thoughts kill. I held in my cough as I entered the bathroom, senses already on high alert. Smoke unfurled around, blinding me for a moment. It took a second to gauge my surroundings, but once I had, it came as no surprise to see my older brother standing in their group. The only boy in here. After all, this was a ladies' bathroom. I watched in the mirror as the cigarette got passed around. A girl with pouting lips, caked in maroon lipstick, passed it to my brother. His lazy smile at her and the smoke around were in competition to make me nauseous. A familiar bubble of bile arose in my throat as he puffed out carbon monoxide. I clenched my nostril muscles, focusing on fixing my hair in the bathroom mirror. Luckily for me, I hadn't been spotted yet. They all started laughing as he did some kind of trick with the smoke. My eyes were so narrowed now, I could hardly see out of them. Once my hair was done, I walked over to the door, palm raised to open it. When a girl's voice said, "It's coming tomorrow," my brother's voice answered, "The LSD?" "Shut up!" the girl barked, leaving the bathroom deathly silent. I felt his eyes on my back before I saw them. Next thing I knew, I was slammed into the bathroom wall, inches from a familiar face. his lip curled. "Hello, sister." "Your sister?" the girl asked. She better not be a snitch. My brother didn't answer. I took refuge in the fact that I knew secrets of his that he'd rather die than let his friends know. Or that I knew he still had nightmares about Dad. Or that he used his blanket as a tissue for his snotty nose. His breath steamed on the mirror next to my head as he leaned in harder, earning a yelp from me as I felt his shirt button press in. "Don't let me find you in here again." I arched an eyebrow in response, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "LSD? No way." "Oh, brother, should I tell them?" He read all his secrets on my face. "Go to hell," he snarled. I held out my hand in answer. He looked ready to spit on me as he pulled out a $5 from his pocket. I shook my head with a smile. He took out another. I took the money from him, squirmed out from the bathroom, and contemplated calling Mom. I knew Caleb drug dealt, but this? Everyone knew it never stopped at Cigarette Drum. It had only been a matter of time. And that night, I gave the money to Mom with a too bright smile. "You know, honey, I don't need a commission from the money you earn. The job pays well, Mom," I said with a shrug, the lie spilling from my mouth like silk. She gave me a side hug, then carried on with her work. I lingered for a moment, at odds on whether I should tell her. But when I saw her eyebrows sink into a furrow, her lips into a frown, I decided that she had enough on her plate. When the front door slammed, indicating my brother was home from God knows where, neither my mom nor I left our rooms to greet him. The ritual had been long gone since Dad had left. Well, Dad's hello was more actions than words to Caleb. I can't deny that I hadn't felt the want to stop him all the time. Hearing his footsteps outside my door, a feeling of hate so red clouded my mind that I found it hard to breathe. Mom was at the epicenter of it all. Her money had all been stolen by him for the drugs he was addicted to, then played off as a fraud. I was simply recycling the money back to the owner. It was tough falling asleep that night, knowing I couldn't stop what was going to happen tomorrow. But even if I could, I wouldn't. I wanted him to hit rock bottom. That was the only hope for change for him. And maybe that made me a sucky person. Hell, the worst person. But it's what he deserved in my eyes. The pain I saw flit on my mother's eyes when he'd come home drunk a few weeks ago was enough to make my fiery personality want to put a bullet through his heart. I avoided that bathroom at all costs on Tuesday. There was no way I'd be near choked again. I'd had to cover the bruises from yesterday up with a woolen scarf. In summer, I looked like a right idiot. School went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as a high school day in America can possibly go. And then I was home. I put my phone on D&D, the thoughts running through my mind, demanding instant attention. Being home alone was one of my favorite things. Just my mind and I. I sat on my windowsill, watching the city below me. There was something so serene in feeling the wind play on your face, to be isolated, but to also see hundreds of people below you, hustling around. I wonder if this is how God feels. I don't know how long I sat there for, but when I next opened my eyes, the sky was pitch black, and the city was now bustling with partygoers, dressed in sparkling dresses, with equally shiny champagne glasses in hand. I quickly climbed inside, wondering why my mom hadn't called for me yet. But then I heard a noise from her room. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had gotten, but it loosened as I felt her presence in the house. Caleb wasn't home yet. "Mom?" I asked, tentatively pushing her door open with a toe. I got a shock when I saw her bloodshot eyes turn up to look at me, tears streaming down and mixing with her mascara. I rushed to her side. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, a little forcefully, the panic already rising. Her eyes held mine as she whispered the words I thought I'd never hear. "Caleb is dead. Chad." The phone finally rang. It had been 5 days. The investigators said they'd call once they found out what had happened. "LSD doesn't kill," I murmured to myself over and over. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. "Hello?" I answered, words tasting weird on my mouth after not talking for nearly a week. "Is your mother there?" I passed the phone to my already crying mom, leaning in to listen over her shoulder. I only got bits and pieces. 5 minutes later, my mother put down the phone, hand still trembling. "It wasn't LSD. He didn't take LSD. So he took something else?" She shook her head, her throat bobbing as she swallowed a sob. "The supplier sold them a synthetic drug as LSD. I had one goal. One. To put that supplier behind bars for the rest of his life. Maybe that would take away the guilt that I practically killed my own brother. A life of regret." When Raj had stealthily installed the iSpy 200 Vision Plus device on his wife's prescription glasses 2 weeks ago, he had no idea the device would enable him to watch and hear from her perspective. In a way, relive her last day alive. It was this morning. Raj had received the Blue Dart courier with the pen drive containing the recording of the last day of Mira's life, her first and only day of wearing her glasses with the iSpy installed, just before the horrific car accident in which her car had been hit on the rear by another fast-moving vehicle. The police believed it to be a truck or a bus. Mira's Ford Endeavor had spiraled out of control and plunged into the river beside the road where she had drowned before she could be rescued. When her car had been pulled out, Raj had collected her things, including her glasses, and sent them to the technical facility of the iSpy Corporation in Mumbai, where the team had extracted the audio and video recorded on the device and mailed the file to Raj on a pen drive, along with a hefty check for their services. Taking a deep breath, Raj poured himself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, which also happened to be Mira's favorite wine, for he needed his courage for what he was about to do. 3 large gulps and soothing warmth in his throat equipped him the nerve to plug in the pen drive and click on the folder dated July 24th, 2021. Wondering what their 16-year-old daughter Hina would think of this blatant breach of his wife's privacy. Raj pressed the play key. The world came into focus with dainty hands, with black painted fingernails, placing the glasses over a nose. The camera panned to the left and focused on the other side of the bed, where a portly man lay sleeping, with his mouth slightly agape. Raj watched the laptop screen, with his heart racing, as Mira leaned closer and kissed his bearded face before wrapping her gown around her body and proceeding towards the bathroom. He paused and watched the affectionate gesture again, frowning. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't remember his wife kissing him in the past 3 months. Not since his near-fatal heart attack. Was there a corner of her heart that still loved him, even though she was cheating on him? Raj shrugged the thought away, and taking another sip of the wine, resumed playing the video. In the bathroom, Mira placed her glasses on the bathroom sink while she proceeded to undress and step into the shower. For a few moments, Raj hated himself for lowering the laptop screen. This wasn't why he was spying on his wife, and somewhere in his heart, he knew he was violating her privacy after she was dead, which made it worse. But then he lifted the screen once again to watch his wife bathing, still as glorious at 43 as she was 20 years ago when they had first met. Raj couldn't credit her genes for her fitness levels, for her 2 sisters were both overweight and looked 10 years older than their age. The credit was all Mira's. She loved swimming in the clubhouse and sweating it out in their backyard with her 10-kilogram kettlebell. With a twang of shame, Raj glanced at the tires of fat around his waist, which made it impossible to see his feet without leaning over. Maybe he deserved a wife who cheated on him. After all, he had completely let go of himself over the past 10 years. A factor, his doctor proclaimed, had contributed to Raj suffering a massive heart attack at 46, despite having no history of heart disease. Mira put on her glasses as she emerged from the bathroom and got dressed in a navy blue suit for her office meeting. Each Monday, she had a meeting with her boss, a man she detested but tolerated because it allowed her to provide for her family. As she combed her long, wavy hair and effortlessly styled them into a chignon, Raj caught his own reflection in the mirror on the chin behind her. A middle-aged, unshaven, unemployed man perched on the edge of the bed, wistfully watching his beautiful and successful wife, who was everything he wasn't. Did he feel resentful towards her? Was it her fault she had done well in her life, while he had simply failed at everything he tried? Was it love that still kept them together? Or was she only with him for the sake of their teenage daughter? "I'm going to be late today," she said, without glancing at her husband. Today's the last date for the submission of the RFP response, and Kana would expect me to finish it before I finish my day. "How late?" he asked desolately. "Late," she said firmly, giving him an icy stare. "Eat your dinner if I'm not home by 8. I hope you can manage to feed yourself and Hina." It was more of a statement than a question. Raj heaved himself from the bed with much effort. "Let me get breakfast started. I'll eat in the office. Anyway, I can't eat anything before my Monday morning meeting. You know that." Through the camera, Raj saw his own sorry figure as Mira grabbed her purse and laptop bag and left the room without another word to him. She paused by their daughter's room, and after a perfunctory knock, opened the door and stepped in, closing the door behind her. Raj remembered sticking his ear to the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. But all he had heard were some muffled noises, as though they were deliberately trying to keep their voices down. It had started 2 months ago, when one night, Raj had woken up to find his wife's side of the bed empty and loud arguing noises coming from their daughter's room. As he had tiptoed to Hina's room, he heard his wife yelling, "Do you know how old you are? I'm 16. I'm not a child anymore. You're just 16. You're still a child. You cannot do this." "I can and I will," the daughter had argued back. "I forbid you." And on the argument had fired back and forth between mother and daughter until Raj had stepped into the room and both had frozen and then sputtered an apology for waking him up. Docilely, Hina had apologized to her mother and Mira had embraced her daughter. But Raj had sensed that it was just a temporary ceasefire owing to his heart condition, and the real issue between mother and daughter was not yet resolved. When he had probed about the subject of the argument, both had dilly-dallied without giving him the truth. While he appreciated their concern for his health, Raj wanted to be part of important discussions affecting their daughter and wasn't happy with being left out. Now he watched keenly as Mira stood facing their daughter, Hina, who was still in bed as it was early for school. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mira said warmly. Hina, a scrawny 16-year-old girl with crazy curly hair, mumbled a good morning from under the covers. "I was leaving for office. I wanted to talk to you before I go," said Mira, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hina sat up on the bed, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, Mom. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" Raj's heart swelled with happiness at the concern he heard in his daughter's voice for his health. While not the most affectionate or expressive person in the room, Hina did show her love occasionally through her gestures. Mira sighed deeply. "Your dad's fine. He's recovering, you know. We can't let anything stress him out." Raj thought Hina looked away guiltily at her mother's words. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" Mira pressed on. Yes, Mom? Have you met him again? Outside classes? No. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure, Mom. Mira's gaze dropped to the bed cover, and her delicate fingers smoothed out the covers. I know you went to his house on Friday. Hina's expression was that of a deer caught in the headlights. I went to his house to say goodbye, she stammered. Mira's sigh was deep and audible. I want to believe you. Really, I do. But I can't. You've broken my trust, Hina. Hina was now almost in tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. But really, I had gone to his house for the last goodbye. I'll never see him again. Except at school, of course, where I can't avoid him. Good. You know, once your dad is better, we'll do something to fix this problem permanently. Hina's ears perked up at the suggestion. What do you mean, Mom? I mean, there's more we can do to fix this problem. I don't want to do anything right now because of your dad's precarious health. But once he's better, at this, Hina threw the covers and jumped out of bed. You can't punish him, Mom. It was my fault, as much as his. Promise me you won't do anything. Mira rose, placing the strap of her laptop bag across her chest. I'm not promising anything, sweetheart. Let's talk about our options in a few weeks' time. Until then, if you see him again outside class, I'll know right away. Hina stared at the wall clock behind her mother's head. I won't see him like I promised. Raj's mind galloped to process the new information he had learned about his daughter. She had a boyfriend. Apparently, a boy from her class. Was that the reason for the strife between his wife and his daughter? Or was there more? He wondered, as he fast-forwarded the part of Mira's day where she attended her Monday morning meeting with her boss and worked in the office. Everything about the exchange surprised him because he was the overprotective parent, constantly worrying about every little thing regarding their daughter, while Mira was more of a liberal parent who allowed Hina to experiment and even encouraged mistakes, even though he thought it inadvisable for young people to date before 18. What Hina was going through was completely natural and expected. Why had his wife freaked out so much on finding out about Hina's boyfriend? Resuming the video from the point where Mira got into her Ford Endeavor after leaving office, Raj watched keenly as she checked her freshly applied lipstick in the rearview mirror and used her dainty hands to smooth her hair and tuck some wild strands behind her ear. She turned on the ignition and began driving in a direction opposite to where their home was located. When the police had questioned Raj about where his wife was returning from that fateful day, he had surmised that perhaps she had taken a detour to the market to shop for something for their daughter's upcoming 17th birthday. And maybe she had liked something, but wanted to discuss with her husband before buying the gift. Raj wasn't quite sure what had prevented him from sharing his suspicions with the police, that his wife was probably having an affair and was returning from a rendezvous with the other man. It was probably as a token of respect for their 18-year-old marriage and consideration for their daughter that Raj had kept his suspicions to himself. With rapt attention, Raj watched the curve of the river hugging the road and the familiar city roads zipping past the fast-moving vehicle. As he expected, the car moved through the South City Market and towards the residential area next to it. Mira parked the car behind a dented Mahindra XUV 500 parked in the parking space and stepped out with her purse over her shoulder. She rummaged through her purse for something, and apparently not finding it in there, she leaned into the car, opened the glove compartment, and extracted a pepper spray. With the pepper spray ensconced in her purse, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. The pepper spray confused Raj. If she was going to meet her lover, he'd have expected her to be rummaging in her purse for something other than a pepper spray. The heavy brown door was opened by a balding man with horn-rimmed glasses on his nose. Mr. Sehgal? Hina's physics teacher? Was Mira having an affair with him? She detested the man and had even argued with him over some marks after the first term examination results. Nothing made sense. The man's face deflated on seeing the visitor. Raj thought Sehgal looked shocked to the point of being afraid on seeing Mira. Surprised? Said Mira. Why? Were you expecting my daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. I know you've been having a romantic relationship with my underage daughter. The man inhaled deeply. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof. Those letters you wrote to her. I found them, and I immediately knew they weren't written by a boy, but by a grown-up man. How could you do this? You're at least 50 years old. You disgust me. The man's nostrils flared with fury. Listen, you can't come to my doorstep and accuse me of something I haven't done. You need to leave, he said, beginning to close the door. Mira's ring-studded hand stopped the door from closing. I am leaving, but not before I warn you to stay away from my daughter. If you try to talk to her outside the class again, I'm going to inform the police. The only reason I haven't already contacted them is that Hina begged me. She begged me to let it go, and... Mira paused. The man was peering from behind the half-closed door with his narrowed eyes. And what? Mira sighed deeply. And nothing. I'm not calling the police right now because of my husband, who is ill. I don't want him to know about this mess. But if you contact my daughter again, I'll have no option but to call the police. Raj's world was spinning around him. So this was what the mother-daughter arguments were about. Now that he realized what had happened, it made perfect sense. Why then had his mind jumped to the conclusion that his wife was cheating on him? And the reason Hina was arguing with her mother was that she had somehow found out about her mother's affair? How could he have been so naive to jump to a disturbing conclusion based on a mere happenstance. The only thing Mira was trying to do was protecting their daughter from the pedophile and protecting her sick husband from the stress of the situation. The sudden onset of guilt at suspecting his innocent wife of cheating on him and violating her privacy made Raj sick in his stomach. Having half a mind to close the laptop screen, Raj continued watching what was probably the last hour of his late wife's life. Soon, she would be on her way back home, and her Ford Endeavor would be hit on the rear by a vehicle that would send her spinning towards the river and to her death. Things seemed to be moving in slow motion as Mira delivered the final threat to the physics teacher, and leaving him with his jaw hanging, reversed her car out of the driveway, turning around towards her home as she drove on the highway next to the river. Raj kept his gaze on her rearview mirror, his heart racing. If he was lucky, he'd be able to view the plate number of the vehicle that had hit his wife's car and hand over the evidence to the police. With his heart in his throat, Raj watched several large vehicles on the highway approaching his wife's car, and some of them overtaking it. Resisting an urge to tightly shut his eyes, Raj continued watching the last few minutes of his wife's life. What must be going on in her mind at the time, he wondered. He regretted not telling his wife how much he loved her and how much he appreciated her supporting the family, especially since he had lost his job. He regretted every harsh word he had said to his wife, every missed opportunity to appreciate her. Each occasion he could have been kinder to her. Thinking of their arguments, and every time he had raised his voice at her, made him run with shame. Was this his punishment for not living a purposeful life? For not living deliberately, but just drifting along the currents of everyday life? Raj sat bolt upright as he saw a vehicle he recognized approach his wife's car from behind. This couldn't be right. Why was the man following her? Raj knew the answer to the question a split second before he saw Segal ram his Mahindra XUV 500 into his wife's car and send her spinning towards the river. Water engulfed the world around him, and he saw the bubbles of air escaping his wife's mouth and nose as the water pressure shattered the windows and rushed into the rapidly sinking car, drowning its only occupant. At some point in time, the glasses drifted away from Mira's face and through the camera. Raj saw his wife's face for the very last time. Some of the guilt that Raj felt for violating his wife's privacy was washed away with the knowledge that he now had the evidence to bring his wife's murderer to justice. Wiping the tears from his eyes, Raj closed the video file and picked up the phone to dial the police. "It's murder, sir." A scream, the sharp clatter of a dropped tea service, the sound of soft sobs, a rush of footsteps up the stairs, the sight of a dead body, and then Silence. "It's murder, sir," PC Connors spoke. DCI Whitcomb eyed the constable wearily, sighing inwardly. He was tired already, and they had just arrived at the scene of a particularly bloody crime. "For future reference, if we ever come across the body of an old lady sitting at her writing desk with a knife through her neck, let's take it as read that it's murder, Connors." DC Whitcomb sat in a chair and surveyed the room. "Where is WPC Sanders? I need her eyes up here." Whitcomb muttered the last sentence under his breath. He was a man who appreciated a woman on the police force, for she would often have a point of view that he would never see. She was certainly good at her job. She took excellent photographs, a new thing in police work. She also did a fine job with fingerprints, although Whitcomb had reservations about their usefulness. WPC Sanders struggled through the door, laden with equipment. No one offered to assist her. She had learned not to ask. With brisk movements, she set up the equipment and started taking photographs. Whitcomb didn't need to be there for this, but he stayed anyway. Connors stood by the door, shifting from foot to foot. DC. Whitcomb sighed again, this time audibly. "Connors, make yourself useful for once and gather the family downstairs, and make sure that blasted butler is there too." Whitcomb didn't like the fish-eyed butler at all. He looked suspicious. Why he looked suspicious was anyone's guess, but Whitcomb had taken an instant dislike to the man. Whitcomb poked around the old lady's room for a few minutes, taking mental notes and nodding his head a few times. Sanders carried on silently. She knew better than to interject her thoughts, but she also knew that she would be asked about her views on the case in due time. Satisfied, Whitcomb left the room, instructing Sanders to get a wriggle on and then meet him downstairs. Whitcomb tested the hallways and the stairs on his way down. Solid, every square inch. Anyone could creep about up here and not be heard, he mused. The old lady had 2 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom lived with their now deceased mother in the mansion. The 3 progeny were all sitting, and they seemed nervous to Whitcomb. Naturally, he thought, one of them is a killer. "I need to interview all of you separately. Once I have finished, I will send you back in here. There is to be no conversing between yourselves until I have finished. PC Connors will be here to make sure that you abide by my directive." "I say!" One of the men stood up, a small frown on his face, and a rather large whiskey in his hand. "The law," Whitcomb said severely, "requires this, sir." The man sat down and said nothing more, but his face showed his displeasure. The woman scoffed, either at her brother's reaction or the DCI's statements. One just couldn't be sure. DCI Whitcomb pointed at the man who had stood up, gesturing for him to approach with the crook of his forefinger. "You first, sir." The questioning went along normal, well-worn lines. Whitcomb saw no need to alter what had always worked. You found out where everyone was during the crime. You looked for corroboration, and you noted any strange behavior. The stories were distressingly similar. Not to put too fine a point on it, the stories were exact. Everyone was downstairs, eating breakfast, when the maid discovered the body. No one had seen their mother since 10 o'clock the night before. All retired to bed at roughly the same time, a little after midnight. The butler and the head housekeeper, a married couple who had worked for the murdered woman for over 30 years, retired to their rooms a little before midnight. All the door and windows had been shut and locked. DCI Whitcomb leaned back and sighed. He had had to deal with 2 murders in his 30-year career before this one, and they had been straightforward. The guilty parties had been easily nabbed, the evidence had been plentiful, and the convictions had been a foregone conclusion. He thought of the men who had been hanged because of his efforts. He could still see them swinging slightly from their final earthly judgment at the end of a rope. With a slight shudder, he returned to his task. "It's a nasty business, sir." PC Connors spoke up. Once again, he was standing in a doorway, shifting from foot to foot nervously. Whitcomb looked at him with some slight irritation. The man had a positive talent for stating the obvious. "Why don't you go get yourself a cuppa? See if the staff have anything to say about it all. Take your time, Connors. Maybe have a biscuit or two," Whitcomb said. The sarcasm in his voice was completely lost on Connors. Connors lost no time in doing so. The detective chief inspector made him nervous at the best of times, but on this case, he seemed positively put out. Besides, he was feeling a bit peckish and could do with a nice cup of tea and a bite to eat. "Well, he's good to have around when we need some muscle," WPC Sanders commented graciously. "Ha! And that's all he's good for." "Still, he's a good lad," Whitcomb said. Whitcomb winced at the thought of Connors becoming a detective chief inspector in the future. The man had no business running an investigation. WPC Sanders would be a far better candidate. But she was a woman, and she would not get the chance to advance beyond her current status. Whitcomb and Sanders went through the bedrooms of the siblings, and that of the butler and his wife as well, but success was limited. It would have been nice to find some bloody clothes tucked away somewhere. But this murderer wasn't as obliging as the other killers he had faced in his career. The evening was fast approaching on this October night. Soon the sun would disappear, and the night would be cold. It might even snow, Whitcomb thought. While he didn't relish the thought of being stranded here, he also didn't want to leave and allow a killer to escape. Whitcomb had the butler make up a bedroom for him. The man blinked rapidly behind his glasses and hesitated slightly before nodding or doing as he was told. Suspicious, Whitcomb thought again. Whitcomb sent the other two home, instructing Sanders to develop the photographs and bring them back early in the morning. Connors was to fill the car's tank with petrol and make sure the vehicle was equipped to deal with a tire puncture. Connor may not be a great copper, but he was good with cars. As he settled in for the night, Whitcomb thought of the suspects. They all had motive, and he knew that one of them had to be the murderer. The butler and his wife knew more than they were letting on, but they were guilty of no bigger a crime than loyalty to the family. The kitchen staff and maids were tight-lipped as well, but Whitcomb was sure that they knew nothing of the murder of old Mrs. Ainsley. Even the gardeners and the handymen had precious little to say about it all, probably because they had nothing of import to tell. Whitcomb sighed and turned out the light. Whitcomb was up early the next morning, well before the three Ainsley siblings. He wandered into the kitchen to see about getting a cup of tea. He found Connors there, chatting amiably with the cook and the maids. They all quickly scraped back their chairs and stood up when Whitcomb entered. Whitcomb waved his hand, gesturing for them to all sit down. He gave Connors an appreciative nod of the head. The man was not lazy, he thought. WPC Sanders is in the library, sir. She has those photographs, Connors said. Whitcomb patted him on the shoulder and told him to carry on, by which he meant that Connors should continue to have a chat and a cuppa, staying out of Whitcomb's way. WPC Sanders did not stand when Whitcomb entered the library. She was studying the panoply of photographs that she had laid out across the ventral table in an impressively large library. Whitcomb was slightly stunned at the sheer size of the room and the thousands of books it contained. Rich folk, he mused, lived much differently than he did. Good morning, Dad, Sanders said as she continued to scan the photographs. I am DCI Whitcomb when we're working, young lady. I am your loving and generous dad when we are off duty. You would do well to remember that, Whitcomb said with some asperity. He loved his daughter, but he didn't like that she had to see such a gruesome sight yesterday. It made him testy. He didn't like having to tell his wife that their daughter had seen a dead body. It made him testy. He didn't like that his daughter had to go home and tell her husband that she had seen more blood than anyone should have to see. It made him testy. Sorry, Dad. DCI Whitcomb. Sir. Sanders looked up and grinned at her father and her superior at work. She was not above a little needling. Enough with the pleasantries. What do you see in these pictures? Sanders stood up and directed Whitcomb to a set of photographs near her. You can see that the old lady was killed at the desk. No blood trail, just splatters and spray. Except in this one area, very little blood. So, Whitcomb said. So, the killer cut through the jugular and the blood spurted on him, Sanders said. Or her. I don't think it was a woman, Sanders said. It takes some strength to get the knife completely through the neck. Whitcomb looked through the photographs and nodded. Let's sit down, have some tea, and go through the evidence, Whitcomb said. Righto, DCI Whitcomb. And maybe a biscuit. I'm famished, Sanders said. D.C. Connors was instructed not to interrupt the other two officers while they were locked away in the library. He was to continue the all-important work of chatting with the help. Connors nodded seriously and did as he was told. He was especially interested in chatting with the maid who had found old Mrs. Ainsley. She was young, pretty, and available. Your thoughts, Whitcomb started. William Ainsley, the eldest. He and his brother Rupert have a consulting business. Legal experts, they call themselves. They have a scrubby little office off of the high street, and they consult 2 times a week. They bring in less money than you pay me, Sanders said, grinning at her dad. The Queen pays you, he said. Right. South. They basically live off of their trust fund while living here for free. The daughter? Estella. She was married for 20 years. Husband died in a motor accident 3 years ago. She also has a trust fund. She also lives here for free. I have a feeling that the mother didn't want them here, Whitcomb said. Probably true. Look at these photographs. The mother didn't have a picture of any of her kids, but she has several of her late husband. The kids all have a picture of their mother. It's the exact same picture. Someone had copies made of a photograph, stuck them in nice silver frames, and hey presto, job done. One of them is a murderer. True. I plump for one of the boys, Dad. They have the muscle to carry it off. I'm not your dad right now. Also, whoever the killer is has bloody clothes to dispose of and a guilty conscience to assuage. Sanders nodded and looked at her dad. She knew what was coming. Did you ask them? Whitcomb nodded. And? William claims that Rupert had to have done it. Rupert swears that Estella has a murderous streak in her and that she did it. Estella knows in her heart that William is the type to kill the old lady. Convenient, Sanders said. Quite. So, we need to find some bloody clothes. Maybe try to get one of the staff to tell us more than they have so far, Sanders said. A voice spoke from the entrance to the library. I don't reckon you'll find any bloody clothes, or the killer. Sanders and Whitcomb looked up, surprised. Surprise turned to amazement. D.C. Connors strode into the library and sat down, looking at his comrades. Explain yourself, Connors, Whitcomb said severely. He didn't like that Connor had come into the library unawares, and he especially didn't like what Connor said. Connors plopped a book on the table, leaned forward, and spoke. I was questioning that maid what saw the body. Jenny, you see, strolling through the garden. I saw you two lovebirds. Sanders poked at Connors. Like I says, Connors continued, unperturbed. I was asking her about this and that. Lovely girl. We're going to the cinema Sunday afternoon. That's her afternoon off. Connors. Be a good lad and act like a copper, Whitcomb said sternly. Right. So we get to talking about books. She has this cracking good book here, and she hands it to me. It's a murder mystery set on a train. The Oriental Express. The Orient Express, Sanders said, reading the title. That one, yeah. Anyway, what happened was, there's a murder on the train. Turns out all the people on the train had a hand in killing this bloke what killed a baby. This dandified detective figures it out. Frenchman, I think. Belgian, Whitcomb muttered. So there's the story. The book belongs to the family. Jenny tells me that all the kids read it. The butler, too. Okay, so we continue to walk. I find a burn pile near the gardener's cottages. I dig through it and find burnt clothes. I tell her I got to get back and tell you. So we start back. Well, as soon as we leave, I spot a gardener stoking up that fire again. I rush back, but it's too late. Everything is ashes by now. Continue, Whitcomb said softly. He had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Well, sir, then there's the lawyer chap. The what? The lawyer chappie for the old lady. The old lady called him on the blower and told him to step on down here on Wednesday. She wanted to stanchially alternate her will. Alter. Yes, sir, that one. The kids all were there in the living room and they all heard the call to the lawyer chap. So did the butler. And then the kids all go to the library and shut the door. They're in there for a couple of hours. Which is strange, Jenny says, 'cause they don't really like each other all that much. South, that's that. Whitcomb and Sanders nodded, deep dejection on their faces. They were all in on it, including the help. Yes, sir. Jenny tells me the old lady was miserly and didn't pay them much at all, but the kids always gave them money to help them out. Jenny in on it too? Sanders asked. I reckon so, but I still like her. We're stepping out and don't try to stop me, Connors said determinedly. She's guilty of murder, Whitcomb said. I don't reckon she stuck the old lady, Connors said. She knows who did it, boy. I reckon I'm fine with that. I have to let you go then. I can't have a man on the force who knows wrongdoing and lets it go. Connors nodded. I'll work for my dad. Good money to be had in fixing automobiles. It all fit. Everyone colluded to kill the old lady. Everyone was guilty. Nothing, though, could be proven. The murderers were known, yet escaped the justice of the law. They did not escape karmic justice, however. Within a year, all of the siblings were dead. Both boys died from eating tainted fish paste. The woman fell down the stairs at the mansion and died of a broken neck. All of the deaths were suspicious, but nothing could be proven. Curiously, Jenny produced evidence in the form of letters from her father and her mother, a former scullery maid at the Ainsley residence, that showed she was the illegitimate daughter of the late Mr. Ainsley. These letters were produced a few days after the death of the last sibling. She inherited everything. Jenny and ex-PC Connors were married soon thereafter. DCY Whitcomb and WPC Sanders did not attend the wedding, of course. They did not care to consort with murderers, not in it for the money. I was a hacker for almost as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, I lived to mess around with computers, programming, writing, and cracking codes. and surfing to the darkest edges of the internet. What I couldn't learn from manuals, chat rooms, message boards, or friends I pretty much just figured out on my own. So early on I knew that hacking would make me way more money than flipping burgers at Mickey D's, earning a college diploma, or even scoring a high-paying job on Wall Street, and with a lot less of the mess and stress that usually accompanies your average 9-to-5 gig. But it was never about money, and things have changed since then, which was why I'd retired. For obvious reasons, I can't tell you my name. And after you read this, you won't be able to trace it back to my IP address it was sent from, since I've developed and used a multi-level super encryption masking and scrubbing device to send this screed. So, why am I taking the risk of getting back into the game, stepping out of the shadows and into the grid by divulging this secret to the New York Times? Because of the way they've ruined it for all of us. I've had enough and just can't stomach it anymore. Who are they, you ask? In 2 words, today's hackers. These hackers today. They've no respect and are almost always in it only for the money. When I was in the hacking game, it was all about changing the world and making a difference. Sure, every now and then we'd line our own pockets a bit, with enough to cover expenses and then some. But for me, unlike them, it wasn't about the money. Maybe it's just the lone wolf versus mob mentality. Today's hackers are not only creating chaos, but they make no distinction of who it is directed toward. For them, there are no good or bad guys, only easy pickings. And because they do that, it reflects poorly upon our past and present hacker communities as a whole. It's their ransomware attacks that really piss off most of us legit hackers. Nowadays, the bigger their haul, the more likely these greed-fueled Robin Hoodish banditos will invest it in specialization and franchising. They've certainly gotten better at it over the years. Remember the Colonial Pipeline assault? It may have not been the most costly hack attack from 2021 to 2022. Only $4.4 million was made from that hack. But the downtime caused by lost business and revenue was far more financially damaging to them than the ransom size. The WannaCry virus was far bigger in the number of computers it infected, 300,000 plus, and resulted in $6 billion USD of damage, albeit the blackmail payout dollar size wasn't the top dollar in brides for that period. Well, I, for one, want to put a stop to it now. Here's a short list of today's greatest hacker hits. Coming in hot at number 1 for 2021 is the insurance company Can Financial Corp. For a whopping $40 million, which was a record liberation money amount paid up to that point. The second was meat producer JBS's payment of $11 million US dollars, followed by GPS system manufacturer Garmin for $10 million, an unidentified Austrian organization, $4.7 million, CWT Global Travel Services, $4.5, Brenntag, a chemical distributor, $4.4, Travelex, $2.3, resulting in the corporation's declared bankruptcy. Fashion company Fat Face Ltd, $2.0, and then $1.14 million extorted from San Francisco's University of California. Do the math and tally it up. That's a grand total of nearly $85 million US dollars. As 2022 began, so did more digital assaults, beginning with the FlexBooker data breach on January 3rd. The Red Cross charity organization was the next innocent victim. Then came Crypto.com, multiple Credit Suisse banks, universities, hospitals, and even the Costa Rican government. Now, with nearly 36 other major thefts occurring thus far in a year, with still 3 months to go, it's really getting out of hand, isn't it? When today's hackers set their sights on specific ransom amounts, they normally take into account several factors. 1. The size of the infected network. 2. The target's overall net worth, including revenue and clients' accounts held in escrow. 3. The plane of data sensitivity being breached, and that's the way they do it. It not only hurts organizations and businesses out there that put good into the world, but even reputable hackers such as me. Therefore, this really has to stop. And there's only one way to paralyze today's hackers dead in their tracks, to halt them from fermenting further mischief. So, what's a respectable hacker of yesteryear ever to do these days? Basically, the way I decided to deal with it is not stooping to their level. That was up until the day when I had this idea. We, the good guy hackers of yesterday, need to band together and go after all the bad guy hackers of today to fight fire with fire. In other words, globally, the good must unite with one another to go after these nefarious computer criminals to hit them where it'll hurt the most. We hack the bad guys. I've been developing a unique virus that'll infect their devices and which would A, identify offenders so the rest of the world could detect them and out these blackmailers, B, temporarily lock down their software until the threat's resolved, and C, permanently disable and damage beyond repair any hardware used by chronic repeat offenders to stop them and wipe out their access to easy cash flow. With every day that's passed, I got closer to my goal, to halt and hurt today's malicious hackers. And now, I feel I may have cracked that code to allow me access via a back door in all computers that'll leave those greedy bastards defenseless. I'm almost there. And come tomorrow, my friends, sweet revenge. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, I'm back, Marie Antoinette. Squat, beige and Soviet. The Marie Antoinette apartments stood against the stale gray Minneapolis sky. Irony of the worst kind, he thought, blandly ugly and unconscious. He would take exquisitely self-aware irony any day over this 3-story architectural monstrosity, classed up with tacked-on ionic Greek columns, harsh blue LED Christmas lights wrapped inexpertly around them, canned Christmas classics pumping through the air. God, this place was only better than minimum security prison by a hair. But it was all he could afford now, so he'd just have to lower his eyes and his standards every time he approached. He tried to avoid the other people in the building, but a few of the near indigent souls, especially the family across the hall, insisted on pestering him with their lowbrow holiday cheer, the cheap gift of homemade cookies, the invitation of a seat at their dinner table on Christmas night on the flip side of a child's crude drawing of a Christmas tree slipped under his door. All this might have been more bearable if anyone he knew now understood why the Marie Antoinette apartments pained his soul, filled him with righteous rage. He'd certainly never get that from his obtuse, court-appointed therapist, a small, garish woman whose office and clothing reeked of TJ Maxx. So, he amused himself by using up their 50 minutes, complaining about how much he hated living there. His fingers itched to blow the place up, Her told her, to set it alight. She told him there were healthier ways to channel and examine his negative emotions, so he could eventually let them go. He needed to think about what the Marie Antoinette represented to him, she told him, to look deeper, and to perhaps think about its positive attributes instead. This made him laugh hysterically. How much deeper can I go than living inside the damned building? Should I dive into the meaning of my laminate, faux wood floors and Formica kitchen counters, the rancid smell of old cooking that oozes from the graying, cracked walls studded with nail holes and abandoned archaeological remnants of tape from all the miserable souls who inhabited the purgatory before me? How about the rust-stained, leaking toilet and body oil-marked tub? Should I look for Rorschachs in its grimy patterns? That's not what I meant, she said quietly. And you know it. Well, I cherish my negative emotions, he said, suddenly tired. They're the only things keeping me going these days. Tilda, near morning, a couple of weeks before Christmas, after one too many sleeping pills, he had a vivid dream. It started out of focus as he dragged himself toward the Marie Antoinette, bearing his usual cloak of heavy gray resignation, and pushed hard against the main door, as he always had to. Only this time, the door sprang open, and instead of jarring, cold Christmas music, warm strains of exquisite chamber music vibrated through him. All came into focus. The entryway had grown to twice its size, the gray, nondescript industrial carpet replaced with a glowing mahogany parquet floor. Instead of aluminum mailboxes and a frameless wall mirror on either side of the narrow space, giant gilt mirrors reflecting golden candlelight and gold and cream fleur-de-lis silk wallpaper covered the walls. The walls heaved outward until the room became what it wanted to be, a grand palace ballroom, complete with gently tinkling, candle-lit chandeliers, a ballroom for him alone. The effect was ostentatious, but stunning, the way his ex-wife had decorated their homes in the city, on the island, at the lake, near the slopes, their homes for every preposition, all gone now. He dream-prayed he had died and gone to heaven, but he awoke to the same ordinary life, the drab apartment, a shift at the same greasy job, and another boring session after it with his therapist, the only person he ever said more to than, "Can I take your order, would you like fries with that?" A woman he would have sneered at, if not ignored, in his old life, and would again someday when his luck turned. Would he tell her about his dream? He decided he would. It seemed safe enough, wasn't about the past, the present, or even the future. It was just a dream. But was it? As his workday dragged on, the customers who filed into the restaurant looked at him, smiling with something more, it seemed to him, than mere pre-Christmas cheer. He began to wonder if the dream wasn't a message. Maybe his luck was about to turn. He'd paid his dues after all. That old feeling began to tingle again. By the time his 4 o'clock appointment with TJ, as he'd taken to calling her, even to her face, arrived, he'd decided he must keep the dream to himself until he knew more. He had to get through the session, get home, eat a little something, and take his sleeping pills. "You seem distracted today," TJ said late in the hour. "Something happened this week?" Same old, same crappy job, same crappy apartment." He shifted his gaze to the pressed board, "Believe" plaque near the window before she could read him, but she was astute, this small, tacky woman. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her cock her head. "You're not complaining like you usually do. Did something change?" "Like I said, nope. Maybe I've adjusted to living in a shithole, I don't know." He attempted to give her an aw shucks grin, but felt his face contorting in weird ways, so he scrambled to throw her a bone. "Have I told you about my neighbors across the way?" He leaned back and sneered, coming up with an awful lie. "I'd swear to God she's killing him sometimes, and man, I wish she'd succeed so I can get some rest." "What do you think it means, Doc? That I don't care if he dies?" TJ sighed and drummed her red fingernails on her thigh. "It's Clauso 450, she said. "Let's just pick this up next week." Tilda. The dream started the same as before. Heavy quotidian dread as he approached the stunted building, growing excitement and wonder as it opened to a Versailles-like hall of mirrors. But this time, the hall was filled with people, giant people. People twice his height, in silken 18th century finery, swirling and spinning around the room, wind-up dolls and white wigs with faces he recognized. His old clients, Wealthy people he'd cheated and stolen from for years. People he'd fooled into being his friends. People from the life he wanted back desperately. He tried to speak, to get their attention, but nothing came, not even air. As he watched, the dancers grew larger. Wait, no, he grew smaller. He was shrinking, becoming more and more insignificant. An insect, a speck, dirt. He would always be dirt. Tilda. He stumbled through the rest of the week, his nights vast and dreamless. TJ seemed surprised to see him in the waiting room early but said nothing. He sat on her couch, cleared his throat. I had this dream, he said, that my building became a palace, but one I will never have access to again. His voice shook. She handed him the tissue box. Yes. He gave her a brief description of the dream. What do you think it means? She asked. Isn't that your job? No, she said simply, and crossed her arms, waiting. I guess. I don't think I'll ever again have the life I had before. I don't think, he said, swallowed. I deserve it. No, she said again, not clarifying what she meant, which oddly made him feel more respect for her. So, what now? That's up to you. Well, a hint might be nice, he whispered, wanting to scream. He swallowed. You are my damn therapist after all. Okay. What do you miss most about your old life? Not from in here. She tapped her head. Not ego. From here. She tapped her chest. Heart. What do you really miss? He shook his head. I don't know. Without those things on the table, nothing. I mean, I don't have kids. My ex-wife was a money-grubbing bitch, and my friends... Shit, I didn't really have those. Maybe luck. But that's not what you mean either. I know what you're getting at, but you're barking up the wrong tree. She smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her since they'd met, before she'd gotten to know him. I don't think so. I think you're getting somewhere. Maybe your dream was telling you more than you think. Like I've said before, dig deeper, go further. The answers are there, inside that building and inside you. He choked back a snarky, whatever Obi-Wan, and nodded at her. Glancing at the clock above the door, he stood, smoothing his sweaty palms against his jeans. Hold on. She held up a finger and smiled again. I have something for you. He stared, not comprehending. She turned to fish something out of a paper bag, then turned back, holding out a flat package wrapped in green tissue paper and red curly ribbon. Of course, Christmas was only 4 days away. He stammered, cheeks reddening. I didn't get you anything. He didn't know why he was embarrassed, which only made him blush harder. She laughed. I was not expecting you to. Don't worry about it, it's no big deal. Merry Christmas. Merry, yeah, he said, looking down at his name. Jeb, in black marker on the paper, an inexpertly drawn holly leaf and berries below it. A feeling spread, not altogether unpleasant, replacing ungenerous thoughts about the cheesy gift she'd likely procured at TJ Maxx. Thank you, Geraldine, he mumbled and bumbled out the door. Tilda. He worked Christmas Eve day, took the bus, and trudged home as the sun set again too early, the day again too short, carrying his fast food dinner and a bottle of California Pinot Noir he'd splurged on. It was only 4, but it felt like midnight, and his near-unfurnished apartment felt more featureless and tired and depressing than prison ever had been. Because it was his choice to leave it so, he realized. He had nowhere else to go, so he busied himself with eating and drinking, the food cold and congealed, and the wine's mediocrity disappointing. Folding up the empty, redolent burger paper and fries box, he glanced at the present Geraldine had given him, still unopened on the kitchen counter. He wasn't sure whether he'd saved it because it was his only gift, or because he didn't really care about it. Either way, he might as well open it now. He washed his greasy hands in the kitchen sink and poured another glass of wine. He picked up the gift and carefully untied the red ribbon, did his best not to tear the green paper as he picked at the tape, then slid the paper away. Not a tacky nothing after all, but a green, leather-bound book, like the ones his ex-wife had bought by the shelf-load from antiquaries to decorate their homes, curated for color and size rather than content. But this wasn't inert decoration. It was chosen for him to read. He snorted. Crime and punishment. He knew the gist of the story, though he suspected he'd have to read it to get the nuances she intended. Funny, he found himself looking forward to it. His doorbell rang, book in hand, still smiling with surprised respect for Geraldine. He answered the door to find the frazzled woman from across the hall. "Hi, Jeb, right?" Her grin was crooked, a little shy, infectious. He nodded, and she said, "Marissa, you never responded to our invite to dinner for tomorrow evening. Can you make it? We'd be glad to have you. We're making turkey with all the fixings. A couple other neighbors are coming." He considered this only a moment, tasting the oily coating of his pitiful dinner as he licked his lips. "You know what? Yes, Marissa. I'd be honored. Can I bring anything? Just yourself." She grinned again. 6 o'clock sharp, if that's okay, because of the Munchkins' early bedtime. "Sure," he said, finding himself grinning in response. 6. Great. She glanced at his book, then inside the doorway at his near-bare apartment. "Looks like a bookshelf is in order, huh? Maybe even a sofa." She laughed. He couldn't help but laugh with her. "Yes," he said. "It's time." Again, that soft, warm lightness pushing out something hard and heavy he hadn't even known was there. What was it? Only later, while lying on his second-hand mattress on the floor, after he'd read the long first part of the leather-bound book about young, impoverished Raskolnikov scheming and rationalizing his decision to murder a pawnbroker for her money, did it come to him. Like Raskolnikov, he'd lost something along the way, something essential and tender that had shriveled to a hard stone inside him once he began to drip Ponzi scheme money. Something poor little rich girl Marie Antoinette likely never knew her entire tragic gold-plated life. That night he dreamt again, a simple dream. The Marie Antoinette apartments remained an ugly pedestrian building, but he entered with lightness, that warmth down to his bones. He greeted neighbors in the lobby by name, delivered groceries to the housebound old lady down the hall, went into his simply but warmly furnished apartment to make himself a nourishing meal. Christmas morning, he leapt out of bed. If he was lucky, he might find gifts for the children across the hall before noon. Neptune's lair. When I met her, word on the street was that Esme was beyond help. Her friends called her crazy and borderline. By the religiously inclined of former times, she might have been thought of as demon-possessed. During drunken fits, she'd get into fistfights or threaten to throw herself from freeway overpasses. She walked a thin line and repeatedly upset rumors of her demise, taking immense pride in being what she called stronger than dirt. She had a breathalyzer in her car. 2 years ago, she'd overturned her Hyundai in an incident where she was discovered to be 3 times over the legal blood alcohol limit. She made financial ends meet by renting her body out for clinical trials, hoping the entire time that she'd taken placebos instead of the experimental medications upstart pharmaceutical companies produced for everything from bipolar disorder to angina. There were times she'd come home from one of these lab rat money runs with side effects, bad ones. but they'd eventually subside, and she'd make jokes about how at least she hadn't become the victim of sudden death syndrome. That Esme, tougher than dirt, as resilient as rubber. Even though she smoked all my stuff, drank all my wine, and frequently resorted to flings with Little Dicky, a former boyfriend I suspected provided her with something I couldn't, I felt something for her. I made what I called minimum rage, flipping beef patties and assembling burgers at a late-night boardwalk diner called Cracker Jack's. Before the week was up, with Esme's and my drug debts, I'd be begging tourists for change to buy spare cigarettes. For a while, we resided in a tent on the rooftop of a building where Desmond Tutu Phillips, a friend since freshman year in high school, was the apartment building manager. Desmond risked losing his job for giving Esme and me a key to the restricted access rooftop. Despite our unconventional ways, he had the patience of Jesus with us. Even so, I'd still piss over the side of the building, and Esme would relieve herself where and whenever convenient. When we got too grungy, we'd take care of our hygiene needs at the showers meant for beachgoers. At night, we read copiously by battery-operated lantern light and shared a predilection for somber stuff. Our favorites were Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Camus, and Hamid. When we tired of the Cracker Jack's grub I'd bring to our squatter pad, we'd get high and end up eating red velvet cake and whatever else she'd send me to shoplift from the supermarket, a 10-minute walk away. On the stroll back home, paranoid from the nearly toxic cosmic kush, and with my backpack stuffed with our pilfered renegade sustenance, I'd be startled by the sounds of passing cars, thinking a cop was sooner or later bound to stop me for stealing Esme's and my daily booze and bread. Although I feared the cops, I always suspected my weed paranoia was caused by a much deeper-seated guilty conscience. I should have confronted Little Dicky a long time ago. Also, I had left my mother's side when I felt her senescence was becoming a burden. There's no way I had the resolve or character to be the caregiver for an aging parent. When I confessed these thoughts to Esme, she'd dismiss my concerns and say I needed to stop overthinking things. I remember once when Esme and I were walking home from a party, she said, pointing to a couple of graffiti-spraying gangbangers, "Javier, I'm scared. That guy with the Supreme hoodie has a gun." He pointed it at me, never sure whether she really meant such things, but fueled by drug and alcohol-induced courage, I confronted the guy. "Hey man," I said to the one Esme had referred to. "You know what I am?" "A janky spick boy with a death wish," he answered with a sneer. "No, I'm a delinquent out to get delinquents. What you gonna do with that heater?" Turns out he didn't have a gun, just another can of neon spray paint, but he wasn't overly enthused by the tete-to-tete I had with him. He and his friend didn't kick my ass, but Mr. Supreme sprayed me in the eyes with the paint. Esme started mouthing off to him, but even though I was partially blinded, I pulled her away for fear that we'd both get battered. Those are the kind of stupid things I'd do for Esme, but the important thing to me was she would call me things like her ballsy little soldier and lavish me with affection after I'd go out on a limb for her. I put blood, sweat, and tears into the relationship, and rarely did I think it wasn't worth it. The end of our star-crossed romance began after Esme came back from the free clinic where Dr. For the People, Randolph Hamilton, told her she had cervical cancer. After she heard the diagnosis, Esme became determined to go out with a bang. She began visiting Little Dicky more frequently. She demanded I steal tequila instead of wine from the supermarket, and when she drank the Patron I'd bring to our squatter's abode, her temper became hair-trigger sensitive. The only respite I'd get from her gloomy rages would come when I'd invite her to the beach when the moon was full. Apparently, Little Dicky had something against doing things that smacked of romance or chivalry with her. Moonlit midnight swims in the Pacific were one such pastime Dickie didn't seem to have a taste for. On the nights Esme and I'd sink our toes into the wet sand while the moon's phantasmagorical light reflected onto the dark side of the earth, she'd momentarily forget about her terminal diagnosis. She'd also forget about her mortal condition whenever we'd watch movies at the rooftop squat. I don't know if it's the case with most people, but when I'm high and watching a good flick, I'll hear messages in the movie's dialogue. I'll also interpret anything someone says out loud about the film to have personal relevance. I've heard these phenomena are called thoughts of reference by those in the field of mental health. Schizophrenics have them, but I guess when I'm high, I might get a little schizophrenic. Makes me wonder why I keep smoking the Cosmic Kush. But one night, while viewing Scarface with Esme for the 5th or 6th time, she said something along the lines of, "God, it's just so good. I can't get enough of it." To my cognitively distorting and high mind, Esme wasn't talking about the film's extended denouement where Tony Montana gets shot by his sister, then exterminates a battalion of rival narco-gangster cockroaches before he ends up floating face down, bloodied and bullet-riddled in his "The World Is Yours" Miami drug boss mansion. No, Esme wasn't talking about the film. My mind interpreted her statement as referring to her relationship with little Dickie. Before Montana gets the shotgun blast in the back that finally does him in, Esme exclaimed, "Jesus, we all know he's doomed." When she said that, I couldn't help but believe that she was referring to our friend and benefactor, Desmond. If for whatever reason Desmond was doomed, Esme and I would soon be off the rooftop and into the street, nowhere for a loving couple to be, especially when one in the pair has terminal cancer. I didn't know whether Esme's words would attract fate, but I knew that her despair was making her behave more erratically. She started to break down in tears when she'd think of having to be holed up in a hospital or hospice, awaiting the inevitable during the last stages of her disease. That night after the movie, and while coming down off the perception-altering shrubbery, I decided to take a course of action. The next morning, I bought 2 tabs of acid off Tripster Todd, a boardwalk dealer of LSD, and various other hallucinogens. I told Esme that we'd go for a swim at the beach after I got off my shift at midnight. We walked to the beach at close to 2 a.m. On the way there, I picked a purple flower, whose name I didn't know from a garden in front of a well-tended house. As we walked, I put the flower in Esme's hair. The moonless night sky's inkiness was blinding. The tide was low, and we had to walk a good distance to the water. There was no one on that portion of the beach except for us. As she dipped down into the waters ahead of me, Esme expressed her gratefulness for not having any open wounds, given that a recent outbreak of carnivorous bacteria made coastal immersions risky for bathers thusly exposed. Before going waist-deep into the water, I surreptitiously took the 2 tabs of LSD I'd bought from Tripster. After letting the acid dissolve, I gave Esme a prolonged French kiss. In little time, my vision, swayed by the acid, started playing tricks on me. Although there was virtually no light on the beach, my eyes summoned a warm, radiant glow in the heavens above. "Jav, I feel funny," said Esme. I splashed her with water and told her that she was okay, that everything was going to be okay. I knew what I had to do. I played out a dialogue in my mind where I said, "You need to confess," and asked her why she was always going to see little Dickie. In my mind, she responded, "My lips are sealed." "That's exactly what they aren't," my courageous imagination told her. We were up to our solar plexuses in the ocean. I took hold of her shoulders and dunked her beneath. She came up, laughed, then, giddy from the acid, childishly said, "Jav, I'm going to die." I said, "No, you're not, love. You're going to live forever. Remember, Esmeralda Lucero is tougher than dirt." I repeated the dunking gesture, this time less playfully, taking a fraction of a second longer than Esme deemed comfortable for her to be under the tide. The third time I dunked her was even more forceful. She struggled in my grip under the water. I crossed a threshold. She freed herself from my hold, surfaced, then said, "What do you think you're doing?" More in the form of an exclamation than a question. I smiled. The white of my teeth infuriated Esme more. "It's not funny, you hijo de puta. Why do I feel like I'm tripping?" She screamed before trying to dig her nails into my eyes. The time had arrived. I knew the cure. I put her neck into a vice-like hold in the crook of my right elbow and dunked her under the dark waters again. Her arms flailed about. She tried to kick, she writhed, but I held fast. I could hear her submerged cries, but they were muffled and accompanied by an up-bubbling of exasperated air. Her writhing gradually slowed down until she managed a last, weak exhalation and final spasm, and then yielded her spirit to the Pacific Ocean. I left her body floating where I had drowned it. Even though no one had heard or seen what transpired, I was still tripping on the acid, and the walk back to Desmond's apartment building was haunted by bogeymen and illusionary images of people pointing fingers and whispering accusations. I climbed the stairs to the rooftop where my unhoused person's hovel was located, lit a cigarette, and was overcome by an urge to write a song. I took out my notebook and a pen and started scribbling. Moonless night, world's delight, me, you drowning, out of sight, we fear most. Give up the ghost, but before we do, let's make a toast on our tongues. Still feeling young, summon moon, and avoid the sun. We'll be scared, 'cause we've dared. Court Pluto, in Neptune's lair. I put the pen down, satisfied with the verses, and thought of the poor and beaten down, of the fact that we are all victims to the onslaught of implacable and incorrigible time. I thought of what could have been, and of what now would never be between Esme and me. After another cigarette, I laid on my rooftop sleeping bag, unable to forgive myself, despite my best intentions, for the simple thing, the merciful thing I'd done. Before I knew it, I had cried myself to a still and unrepentant slumber, the sleep of both the wolf and the lamb, of the innocently voracious and the imperfectly innocent, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. "I wondered if I would see you again," said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. "Read it to me one more time, Father," Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. "I would be more help if you just told me." "Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage." There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. "Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, 'Hail, Master,' and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him." Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow blankly across the cobblestone. "Finn," called a hushed voice from behind. "Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you." Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him. Not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. Christy? Feck's sakes. Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. I'm sorry, I had to... See the fecking priest again? Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off. He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. Feels longer. Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, "Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me." How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? "So," began Christy. "The question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack?" Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. "Neil," he muttered. "What?" "No," he said. "Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate." Sean nodded. "As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder, that's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Belle and Michelle. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right?" Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. "Christy," he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining and making him appear like an obscure shadow. "You right?" Sean opted for the truth. "Tomorrow. The hit's tomorrow." The next day, Sean met Liam, Michial's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. "Finn," said Liam, "what's the crack?" They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. "How's he going?" Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, "He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm." "Calm?" Sean laughed. "I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted." "Nonsense," said Liam. "I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today." Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. Nothing I ain't done before. Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there. and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the 2 men. "Come on, lads. Christy's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years, said Michel from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christy. Christy flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michial. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christy's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear-view mirror. Michial's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the 2 front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michial, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system, but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen. Christie pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michial. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michial, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air, which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christie. "He's an undercover," said Michiel. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christie's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Mitchell pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casings stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it. At Michiel or Christie. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michelle. "I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christie. "On your knees." Christie took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christie began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christie's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ. Please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christie and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christie. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christie on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn," petrified. "You would never have noticed it if you weren't looking for it." That was precisely the point. The instructions given in my embroidery group had been clear enough. After nightfall, take a stroll on the second lane past the bakery, look for the unlit lamppost, and turn down that dark alley, they said in hushed voices as the pianist began playing in sudden loud fervor, by coincidence. Then you will see a mossy stone staircase, which you will descend, and at the end of it, there is a dim hallway. She lives through the set of green doors on the left. The doors are tall and French like my husband's mistress, but peeling and weathered. I can tell they were once painted a lovely shade of emerald green. Half of that green paint lies in small piles of flakes on the cobblestone. I debate knocking and decide instead to reach with false confidence for the rusted copper handle. It turns downward easily. A small bell rings and echoes. Welcome. On the poster she is grotesque, an example of how time and sin turn a person sour. But in person she has the kind of enduring beauty you can't tear your eyes away from. Do come in, darling. Don't be shy. Contrary to popular belief, I don't bite, although I can't say nothing here does. Her voice is like a wind chime, melodic and resonating, barely brushing over the crashing waves of her words. I wonder if I'm here too long, if that voice will drag me out to deep sea. Or did that only work on men in the myths? Take a seat, love. Yes, there is perfect. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, it's never too late for tea, is it now? I enjoy it late into the night myself, but maybe you've been raised more proper than that. Here, the cup is warm, not hot. If she noticed my shaking hands when reaching for it, she didn't say a word. It takes more than a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the warmly lit room after a dark and shadowy street. Among her many talents, it cannot be said that she was a good decorator. The shabby boards of the walls are empty, but for an assortment of faded newspaper clippings from the highlights of her anonymous career. Obituaries, mostly. A tattered blue curtain with tassels hangs behind the armchair she's perched in, dividing off part of the room. Eccentrically painted shelves house arrays of books and bottles of objects my gaze prefers not to settle on. She would have been called a witch for her collections had she not already acquired numerous more colorful nicknames by the public. The only item of some value is worn loosely around her slender wrist, a heavy and ornate gold watch, the kind of thing that would make a petty thief's day to see glinting underneath a man's sleeve in the street. She catches me admiring it and smiles thinly, holding up her arm up to eye level. Isn't it a beauty? It was my first husband's, this watch. On the 10th anniversary of his death, I'm going to smash it to bits and melt the gold into a necklace for myself. I deserve a little gift from him, I think. Her laugh unnerves me, but I find myself too curious to be afraid. I politely say my condolences for her husband's death. Oh, darling, don't be sorry that that man is dead. The one good thing he did was to be the inspiration for the charity work I do. I haven't always done this. I used to be an actress, you know, a leading lady of the stage. Men would come from all over the city to see my shows, for I was beautiful then. Sometimes after the shows, they would approach me, usually blind drunk, complimenting my dress or what was underneath it, asking for a kiss or a drink or a night. And sometimes they didn't ask. My husband became my husband not because he asked, but because he damaged me. And he was rich enough to get away with it, and clever enough to know that marriage was my only option. She smooths down the skirt of her maroon dress, then looks up at me with a solemn expression I can't fully read. It isn't hard to believe she was once a sought-after woman. Though sunken in age, her cheeks are smooth and her face looks as though it was hand-carved out of porcelain by God. Her hair is twisted into a dark crown atop her head, secured with metallic pins. Her eyes are like a cat's, but not a house cat. No, definitely not. Like those of a tiger that has been left to go hungry for far too long. I will her to continue talking and not look at me with those eyes again. We sip our tea in unison, upholding our masquerade as ladies. She takes in a breath. He said he loved me, and at the beginning I believed it. He may have loved me. He certainly desired me. I think mostly he loved seeing the desire and jealousy of other men when he told them I was his wife. But that got old fast. So did I, in his eyes. When it had been a year and I still had not given him a child, I turned ugly to him, and he acted ugly accordingly. One night, he came home from the pub talking about how the other men's wives had filled their houses with children by now. He spoke of babies like cattle. Then he threatened that he ought to tell the whole town that I was secretly a whore and leave me. I should have kept quiet and obeyed and smothered him in his sleep, like a good wife. Instead, I promised him that as long as I was alive, I would never let a child be born cursed enough to have him as a father. I'm sure you know what happens next. Or otherwise, you wouldn't be here, my darling. She traces a scar on her chin that I hadn't noticed before, extending along her jaw to the start of the delicate bones of her neck. I imagine it snaking around the rest of her throat in a ring, strangling her pale skin, and my breath catches. It looks as if lightning struck her. She was struck, though not by something as rare as lightning. I instinctively touch my collarbone where I know without looking there is a ghastly bruise. My modest neckline covers it, but somehow it feels like she knows it's there. My mark of pain. I hope it goes away quickly so my husband does not think me unsightly. But then again, perhaps that will not be necessary. I nod at her meekly to show that I do know what happens next. I can't say whether he truly meant to kill me, but to hurt me, to wound me, to make my thoughts and words disappear in flames. He meant that with all his heart. The funny thing is, it was him who made my words true. Of course, he couldn't have known that I was with child. Even I did not know then. After, no one would ever get to know. I made a gravestone, although there was nothing to bury. And then, a month later, I buried my poor sick husband next to it, marked only with a slab that did not bear his name. Wealthy and beloved as his gold in his life, in death he became only stone. The disease had taken him so quickly that there was no time for anyone to save him. Shame on chance to take him from this world so young. Got him like poison, essentially. The porcelain around her eyes cracks faintly in amusement. I have nothing to say in response, my mind stuck on the picture of a crude gravestone smaller than it should be. Now, love, how would you like your tragedy to occur? The widows in my town all chose differently. Most agree that the worst methods are only to be used for the worse husbands, but sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to it. After all, all's fair in love and war. Millions of second and third and fourth thoughts crossed my mind on the way here, but now those voices are silent, and there is only mine and hers, and the input of the hissing wind outside. Well, what will it be? In 2 weeks, it will happen. On the way home after a day of work, my husband will feel a bout of hopelessness that gives him a nudge to hurl himself off of the local bridge. The river below is not a kind one, especially to those who never learned to swim. He will have been drunk, since he often is, and everyone knows how he gets when he's drunk. No one will discuss a death as taboo as taking your own life. My children and I will cry and wear black for weeks, though no longer than what is expected. At the same time, the black of our bruises will fade. He won't be missed very much, really. Perhaps that French woman will miss him, but she would have met the man that I knew soon enough. I will decide to raise my children in the countryside alone, and we will be happy. I cannot say yet whether I will regret it. The final time I will see the woman's wild tiger's eyes, she will tell me that not once has she regretted anything in her life. She will say that it was a pleasure to do it, and fearfully I will believe her. "Oh, it really is getting late, love. Your family must be at home expecting you." I reply that they are, and I thank her for her kindness, nervously reaching to shake her hand. How much blood has coated it? On the posters, they say she has killed 3 men, but I know these were simply the times she wanted it enough to make it gruesome. The posters also envision her as grotesque, which means that they have not ever seen her, or the mark on her jaw from her fall after being struck by lightning. The posters know nothing. The men know nothing. We women must stick together, yes? The image of my young daughter appears and consumes my mind. I would do everything in my power to ensure she never has to know the instructions to get here. There will be no scars for my girl to trace. I will make sure of that. I nod and drop the woman's unassuming porcelain hand. Beneath the sound of her wind chime voice is a softer noise I hadn't paid attention to before, almost like a breeze rustling through dying trees, overlaid with the humming of the earth. It is separate from the wind and the rushing of my blood. She notices my piqued interest, and rather than say anything, stands, chuckles, and regally draws back the tattered blue curtain behind her. In view now is a cage filled with twisting and writhing scaled bodies, hissing and competing with each other for air. They move as one, a trembling monster of green. I step back in sudden horror. She isn't looking at me, but I see her eyes flash ravenously. You don't have to worry about them, darling. Their venom is reserved for the venomous, dressed for ruin. On a sticky Saturday evening in downtown Philadelphia, the line for Evie's Eden wrapped around the block. Blaring, fast-tempo music and strobing neon invaded the detectives' senses as they pushed their way through a throng of warm, gyrating bodies to take a seat at the bar. The stench of sweat and stale beer permeated the dark room, and the rush of frigid air from the vents above offered minimal relief from the stifling heat. The officers shouted to make themselves heard over the din, while several people almost knocked the men from their seats in their drunken attempt to squeeze between them and get the bartender's attention. The younger of the 2 men, a clean-shaven blonde with neatly combed hair and stern hazel eyes, tugged at his tie and scowled at a group of scantily clad women with neon-painted bodies as they approached him. They gave him sour looks and a few rude gestures in return before scampering off to find a more willing recipient of their affections. His partner looked down on most of the room at almost 6 feet. Gray streaked through his dark, purposely disheveled hair, and there was a hard glint in his cobalt eyes. His broad shoulders and well-built barrel chest, along with the faint scars littering his arms, made Vincent look less approachable than the blonde detective. The illusion was broken by the deep laugh lines etched into his cheeks as he chuckled and teased his dour partner. You didn't have to scowl at them like that. The poor girls were just being friendly. The blonde scoffed, rolling his eyes as he said, I'm not interested in their kind of friendship. Besides, we're here to work, not socialize, remember? Speaking of, should we really be consorting with criminals to solve cases? Vincent ordered a Corona and lime from a bartender even taller than him, with bubblegum pink and deep purple hair styled in a short mohawk. He accepted the drink with a charming grin and left a generous tip before facing his partner, ignoring his disapproving glare. Criminals make the best informants. This one has helped us with a lot of cases. Her information network is invaluable. The younger detective grit his teeth, holding back an argument. No matter his feelings, the boy had to accept that their case had gone from nearly solved to stone cold in less than 24 hours. They needed whatever help they could get. Vincent's partner tugged at his tie. Sweat rolled down the boy's neck and stained his collar. He had tried to convince him to change out of his uniform, but was unsurprised when he refused. He wondered if the stubborn boy regretted it now with the sweltering heat pressing in on them. Vincent downed his drink and ordered another while his partner gave in, removing his tie and unbuttoning the top 2 buttons. The young detective barked another question before Vincent could comment. "Where is this informant then? Every minute we waste here is another our suspect has to flee the country." "Oh, I don't think we have to worry about that. She should be here anyway." "Ah, there she is." They turned their attention to the top of a metal staircase at the back of the club. Vincent's throat felt dry despite the 2 drinks he'd already finished as he watched his old friend step through the VIP entrance. She gave her white suede jacket to the doorman with an alluring smile, then turned to face the officers as she descended the stairs. Diamond-studded gold stilettos clicked against the metal as she went. Her strapless, midnight pantsuit with a plunging neckline swayed around her ankles and long legs, but cinched tightly at her waist to accentuate wide hips and hug her chest. The fabric shimmered under the strobing neon lights, and the diamond choker that cascaded down her throat like a waterfall and nestled between her breasts flashed brightly. Smooth olive-toned skin contrasted the gleaming jewels perfectly. Bright copper ringlets spilled partially over one shoulder. The rest pulled back with a clip to show off the shaved right side of her head. Russet painted lips with a prominent cupid's bow, dark thick lashes, and a chocolate smoky eye highlighted her high cheekbones and bright electric blue eyes. Vincent turned to face his partner as he scoffed and said, "You're joking." "Nope." "Detective, I'd like you to meet Evelyn Ross." "Evelyn, this is my new partner, Connor Williams." Connor was so distracted by her appearance that he hadn't realized she was walking right toward them. Evelyn smiled coyly and extended an intricately manicured hand. Tiny rhinestones were arranged in a rose design on every other stiletto-shaped nail, which were painted to match her eyes. Her breathy tone was deeper than Vincent remembered, and laced with expertly veiled sarcasm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Detective." Reluctantly taking her proffered hand, Connor forced an awkward smile and said, "Likewise." Her lips twitched with amusement as she dropped his hand, then turned to speak to Vincent with something akin to fondness. "Join me for a drink?" "Of course." Evelyn lifted a panel and moved behind the bar towards a burgundy-painted steel door. Vincent 2 steps behind her. Connor followed, but the senior detective shook his head and said, "Wait here. Get a drink or something. I won't be long." Then, before Connor had a chance to question him, Vincent followed the gang leader through the door. As the steel door to Evelyn's office closed behind him with a click, a chill washed over Vincent's face and arms, leaving goosebumps in its wake. A faint aroma of vanilla and dark cherries replaced the reek of sweat. Vincent's stiff shoulders relaxed at the familiar scent. 4 sleek leather armchairs surrounded a mahogany card table, and a personal bar stood in the far left corner. An ashtray made of cobalt glass sat on the table, clean and empty of any remnants. Vincent's fingers itched for the smokes tucked in his breast pocket. A single painting of a man and 2 women performing around a piano hung on the wall opposite him. It had hung there since the day it went missing from a museum in Boston some 30 years ago, when he was barely a thought. Evelyn's office was quiet, except for the clinking of glass as she poured them drinks. The reinforced concrete walls, painted evergreen, blocked out all trace of music or chatter from the club. Vincent sunk into the cool, smooth leather, stifling a sigh. Evelyn sauntered over to the table, sitting on top directly in front of him and crossing her legs before handing him his glass. Vincent enjoyed the bitterness of the bourbon as it washed over his tongue and slid down his throat. She always did have the best taste in liquor. Vincent watched his old friend curiously as she set the glass aside and leaned close to pull 2 camel blue 100s and a lighter from his front pocket, her lips just shy of grazing his stubbled cheek, and the heady aroma of vanilla and dark cherries briefly overwhelmed him. Electric blue eyes dancing with mirth bore into his as she slipped the cig between his teeth and lit it for him. Then, a rush of clarity and disappointment hit hard as she sat back to light her own. Curls of white smoke drifted from her lips and slowly filled the room. She stared him down with a raised brow until the cigarette had burnt down almost to the filter. Then she said, "So, you going to tell me what you want?" He raised his own brows and grinned teasingly as he answered, "Can't I just come to see an old friend?" Her unimpressed stare pulled a snort of laughter from his lips. She held her hand out expectantly and retorted, "Not when you have your dog waiting outside." Vincent relented with a sigh and pulled a file from inside his jacket, which she snapped from his fingers and threw open on the table next to her. The detective lowered his leg from the table and leaned forward to look over its contents, which she was flipping through with a carefully placid expression. The faces of 15 young women stared up at him, all of whom had gone missing within the last 6 months. The final photograph in the file was a mugshot of a man with beady gray eyes, greasy black hair, a pudgy face, and a sad, wispy little mustache. Vincent watched Evelyn's face carefully as her bright eyes paused on his picture, looking for any sign of recognition. If she did know the man, she wasn't giving it away, so he decided to probe her a little. "He's our main suspect. Goes by the name Rob, full name Robert Carroll. We've been tracking him down for a month, even got a hit on his hideout. Then we go in for the raid last night, and he's gone without a trace, so now we've hit a dead end. Do you recognize him?" Evelyn placed the picture back in the file, closed it, and took a generous sip from her drink before answering with a carefully even tone. "Afraid not, should I?" Vincent kept his own tone light as he pushed a little more. "Well, our files say he was one of your men until about a year ago. You've made it a point to know the names of everyone who works for you, haven't you?" The stare she pinned him with was bitterly cold, and her breathy voice took on a dangerous edge. "My organization doesn't deal in sex trafficking, a fact of which I know you're quite aware." "Yes. I'm also very aware of how you've punished those who have gone behind your back in the past, which is why I thought you might be able to help me find my suddenly missing suspect." The way her lips curled into a cruel sneer and her face turned away confirmed his suspicions that she was involved in Robert's disappearance. He sighed as he put out his cigarette, stood, and placed his arms on either side of Evelyn's hips, caging her in. She met his gaze with pursed lips as he asked, "Where is he, Evie?" The brazen woman leaned forward, trailing her sharp nails down the side of his jaw and over his chest. The coy smirk was back as she goaded him. "If I did know where he is, why should I hand him over to you? My men are mine to punish. That's the deal we made, remember? This isn't some petty drug dealer who stole from you. This man is responsible for the disappearance of 15 women that we know of. Who knows how many are still alive? Their families deserve justice." Evie rolls her eyes and scoffs at his appeal to her better nature. "Oh yes, sitting comfortably in a jail cell watching TV and getting 3 meals a day sounds like justice to me. Those families deserve to see him strung up and castrated. Try again." Vincent muttered a curse under his breath. If it were anyone else, he would just get a warrant, but Evelyn had become untouchable in the last few years. She had half the department, the mayor, even their state senator in her pocket. No one would dare sign a warrant against her, and she'd never take a threat from him seriously anyway. Time to change tactics. He wove his left hand into her ginger curls, running calloused fingers down the back of her neck. She tensed at the contact and repressed a shiver, but the goosebumps erupting over her arms and the excitement in her eyes gave her away. Encouraged, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "For me, then, as a favor to an old friend?" Her nails grazed his cheek again as she glowered. "Right. A friend who only comes to see me when he wants something. I feel a little used. Maybe you could give me something in exchange for my kindness." "What do you want?" He could guess the answer, had known her long enough to read the cues. In their previous meetings, she had always treated him like he was just another business partner, careful to keep her distance, giving no hint toward their long-standing and complicated friendship. Her forwardness now was telling, but he wanted her to say it. A selfish part of him needed her to admit that she had missed their closeness. Evie pushed him back into the chair, placing her knees on either side of his and pulling herself close. Her hand left his cheek, burying itself into his messy dark locks, gripping tight. Evelyn's electric blue eyes bore into his as she said, "Don't play dumb, Vince. It doesn't suit you, and I'm not in the mood for any more games." It was as much of an admission as he was going to get, and Vincent gave in with a groan as he pulled her lips to his in a bruising kiss, one that she returned with just as much vigor. Sometime later, Vincent watched with hazy satisfaction as the cobalt lace of Evie's lingerie disappeared back underneath her shimmering silk outfit. When Evie faced him with an equally sated look, he took a moment to appreciate her swollen, though still perfectly painted lips. Her hair, which he had torn from its clip, cascaded over her shoulders in a wild tangle of curls that made her look deceptively innocent. One could almost mistake her for a normal woman like this, instead of a dangerous crime boss. He wondered how many others had been permitted to see her that way, then scolded himself for hoping he was the only one. Vincent gave up that chance a long time ago, the day he swore his oath and joined the police force. Even this small indulgence was one he shouldn't have allowed himself. Once they finished straightening themselves, the pair looked at each other. Vincent lamented the return of Evelyn's closed-off expression that had been so open and vulnerable under his touch just a few minutes ago. But their time was up, and he came here for a reason. He struggled to keep the regret out of his tone as he asked, "So, where can I find Mr. Carroll?" Evelyn grinned playfully, hips swaying as she walked over to the bar, picked up a cell phone, and hit one of the speed dial numbers. After a few moments, the call picked up. Her orders were curt. "Bring him in." A side door that Vincent swore was a wall before opened, and a beat-up, barely conscious man who matched Rob's description to a T was shoved through by two bulky, suited thugs. Rob, with hands tied in front of him, collapsed to his knees. The thugs backed out without a word, and the door shut behind them, leaving nothing but smooth wall in its place. Evelyn laughed at his incredulous glare and said, "He's all yours, detective." Vincent rolled his eyes and strode over to the quickly fading man, tossing a sarcastic remark over his shoulder as he yanked the suspect up. "If you were going to hand him over anyway, why bother making such a fuss?" She giggled and walked over to open the burgundy door for him. He could already see his younger partner's expression morphing from annoyance to surprise and disbelief. Evie's breath at his ear sent a tingle down his spine. "Well, I thought he would make a good gift, but I wanted something too. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it." He glanced to the right to meet her roguish grin as she continued. "Happy birthday." Connor took the unconscious trafficker off his hands, so Vincent turned back to Evie, who stood in the doorway with arms crossed, looking way too pleased with herself. He had forgotten that his birthday was tomorrow, and that it was something he and Evie shared. Vincent chuckled wryly and carded a scarred hand through his hair as he thanked her. Then he helped Connor drag their suspect out to the car, tossed him in the back, and settled into the driver's seat. From the corner of his eye, he saw his partner open his mouth, most likely to barrage him with questions. "Don't ask. It's complicated. But now you see what I was saying about Evelyn being one of our best informants. This isn't the first time she's handed our guy right to us, and it probably won't be the last." Connor didn't press for more information. He faced front with a thoughtful, almost conflicted look, and the ride to the station passed in silence. A silence that Vincent spent thinking of her, of their bodies pressed together, and foolishly wishing that he could do it again.